I was standing in my kitchen making coffee when my phone buzzed with a photo from Cancun. My husband was smiling on a white sand beach with his arm wrapped around my younger sister. Under the picture was a single text. "We're in Cancun together. We fell in love. We're never coming back. Don't bother calling." For a full minute, I couldn't even breathe. 12 years of marriage, gone in one message. My own sister. The woman I'd defended my entire life. I stared at the screen until another message arrived. "By the time you read this, we've emptied our room, closed everything we needed, and started our new life. Just move on." I didn't cry. I simply replied with 2 words. "Good luck." Then I cancelled every joint credit card, froze every shared account, changed every lock, and contacted my attorney before sunset. I thought that was the end. I had no idea my husband had secretly done something weeks earlier that would drag all 3 of us into a courtroom. When the judge finally looked at my sister and quietly asked one question, every person in the courtroom turned to stare at them. That was the moment everything they had planned began to collapse. "My name is Emily Carter, and I'm 30 years old. Until that morning, I believed I had the kind of marriage people spent their whole lives hoping to find. Daniel and I had been married for 12 years, and although life wasn't perfect, I never doubted his loyalty. I never imagined the 2 people I trusted most would become the reason my entire world collapsed. My younger sister, Olivia, had always struggled to keep her life together. She bounced between jobs, relationships, and apartments, always promising she had finally changed. Every time she fell, I was the one who helped her stand again. 6 months earlier, after she lost her apartment, I convinced Daniel we should let her stay in our guest room until she got back on her feet. Looking back, the warning signs were there. They laughed together a little too often. They disappeared into long conversations whenever I left the room. Sometimes I caught them exchanging quick glances that ended the second I noticed. Each time, I blamed myself for overthinking. They were family. Why would I suspect anything? Then came the morning they both vanished. Olivia's room was empty. Daniel's closet was half cleared out. A few minutes later, the Cancun photo arrived, followed by the message that ended my marriage. After freezing every joint account, cancelling every shared credit card, changing every lock, and calling my attorney, I started organizing every financial record I could find. That's when I noticed something strange. One important legal folder containing property papers and business documents had disappeared. At first, I assumed Daniel had stolen it out of spite. Later that evening, my bank called with news that made my blood run cold. The bank manager asked if I could come in that same afternoon because they didn't want to discuss the matter over the phone. The moment I sat down across from her desk, she slid a folder toward me. "Mrs. Carter," she said gently, "about 3 weeks ago, someone submitted paperwork authorizing a large financial transaction using your digital signature." My stomach tightened. "I never signed anything." She nodded. "That's exactly why we called." The signature looked identical to mine, but the authorization date matched a week before Daniel and Olivia disappeared. I walked straight from the bank to my attorney's office. After reviewing the documents, she looked up with a serious expression. "This isn't just suspicious," she said. "Someone may have committed identity fraud." Within hours, we reported everything to the authorities. The detective assigned to my case moved quickly. He requested bank records, document histories, and surveillance footage from the offices where the paperwork had been filed. 2 days later, he called. "We identified your husband entering the building several times before he left the country." Then he paused. "Your sister was with him during at least 2 of those visits." I closed my eyes. Cancun hadn't been an impulsive romantic escape. It had been the final step of a carefully planned scheme. Over the following days, Daniel kept sending smug messages from Cancun. "Hope you're adjusting. You should just move on. You'll never prove anything." I never answered. Instead, I saved every text, every photo, every timestamp. The detective told me something I never forgot. People think leaving the country erases what happened. It doesn't. Evidence travels much farther than people do. Then, almost 4 weeks after they fled, he called again. His voice sounded different this time. "They are back." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "They voluntarily returned to the United States. They believe there's no criminal case waiting for them." He paused before adding quietly, They're about to discover how wrong they are. The courtroom was quieter than I expected. Daniel sat beside Olivia without looking at me. Just weeks earlier they had been posting smiling beach photos from Cancun, acting like they had escaped every consequence. Now they both looked exhausted, though Daniel still carried the same arrogant confidence I'd seen in his messages. When the hearing began, his attorney stood and smiled politely. "Mrs. Carter is understandably emotional after the end of her marriage," he said. "But the financial documents were signed voluntarily. My clients did nothing illegal." I didn't react. My lawyer simply nodded and called our first witness. A digital forensics specialist walked to the stand carrying a detailed report. Using login records, timestamp histories, IP addresses, and device authentication logs, he explained exactly how my electronic signature had been copied and attached to documents without my knowledge. Then security footage appeared on the courtroom screen. There was Daniel entering the office where the paperwork had been submitted. Minutes later, Olivia walked through the same entrance carrying a folder. Neither of them looked surprised until the timestamps appeared beside the video. Their attorney's confidence disappeared. The judge leaned forward. "So Mrs. Carter was not physically present?" "No, Your Honor," the expert replied. "The evidence confirms she was elsewhere when these documents were prepared." Daniel suddenly cleared his throat. "It was Olivia's idea," he blurted. Olivia turned toward him in disbelief. "You're blaming me? You said everything was legal." Their whispered argument quickly became impossible to ignore. For the first time since this nightmare began, they weren't acting like soulmates. They were acting like strangers trying to save themselves. The judge waited patiently until the courtroom fell silent. Then he looked directly at Daniel and asked one calm question. "If Mrs. Carter willingly signed every document," he said, "why did the two of you leave for Cancun the very next morning?" Neither Daniel nor Olivia answered. The silence told everyone exactly what words could not. Daniel opened his mouth twice before any words came out. I panicked," he finally said. The judge didn't respond. He simply looked down at the evidence spread across the bench before raising his eyes again. Olivia suddenly interrupted. "This wasn't supposed to happen," she whispered. "We thought everything had already been approved." Daniel spun toward her. "Stop talking. You told me it was legal. You signed the paperwork too." Their voices grew louder until even their own attorney buried his face in his hands. The polished image they had tried so hard to maintain disappeared within minutes. My lawyer calmly introduced another exhibit. Printed copies of the Cancun text messages. The smiling beach photograph. The message telling me they were never coming back. Then the timeline showing the fraudulent paperwork had been submitted before they boarded their flight. The judge carefully reviewed every page. Financial investigators testified that the attempted transfer had failed only because I froze every joint account and reported the suspicious activity immediately after receiving Daniel's message. Had I waited even another day, the outcome might have been very different. For the first time, I realized staying calm instead of reacting emotionally had protected everything I had worked for. After a brief recess, Daniel's attorney quietly requested to discuss a possible settlement. Olivia sat silently, staring at the table with tears running down her face. Several family members who had believed their story avoided looking at me altogether. No apology could erase what had happened. When the hearing concluded, the judge ruled in my favor on the financial disputes while the separate fraud investigation continued through the proper legal process. As I walked out of the courthouse, Daniel hurried after me. "Emily," he called softly. I stopped but didn't turn around. "Please, can we talk? Just one last time." I finally turned to face him. Daniel looked nothing like the confident man who had smiled from that Cancun beach. His shoulders were slumped, his eyes were bloodshot, and for the first time in 12 years, I saw genuine fear instead of confidence. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I made the biggest mistake of my life." I nodded once. "I know." His expression changed, almost hopeful. "Can we fix this?" I shook my head. "No, Daniel. You didn't destroy our marriage when you left for Cancun. You destroyed it long before that, when you chose to lie every single day." He lowered his head without another word. A month later, our divorce was finalized. The financial issues were resolved through the legal process, and I was finally able to close every account that had once connected our lives. My parents eventually came to my door with tears in their eyes. They admitted they had wanted to believe Olivia's version of events because accepting the truth about their younger daughter had been too painful. I forgave them. But I couldn't trust Olivia again. Some betrayals change a family forever. Months passed. I sold the house that had become a reminder of broken promises and moved into a smaller place that finally felt peaceful. One evening my phone buzzed. It was Daniel. A single message. I think about what I lost every day. I read it once. Then I deleted it. No reply. The day they texted, "We're never coming back," they believed they had escaped the consequences of their choices. They were wrong. Justice wasn't watching them lose. It was discovering that my future no longer depended on either of them.